As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we decided to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Zac is known as the Sales and Persuasion Strategist. He's grossed over $150 million in sales, and he's been a top speaker for people like Tony Robbins. Now, he's helping companies like yours to create high-performance sales teams that consistently crush it. The key to his success was the power of proximity. He found a way to surround himself with the best in the world so he could become one of the best in the world. One of his reasons for helping companies with their sales is that he grew up watching his parents struggle in business, eventually watching them lose it all. Twice. He's committed to helping other entrepreneurs and their families so that they can learn from his mistakes. His mission is to simplify the complexities of business and develop high-performance leaders that create predictable results and maximum impact. What he loves most about what he does is witnessing those light bulb moments where information leads to transformation and leaders get to experience the fulfillment of reaching their next level in business. Hey, Zac. So again, thank you so much for being on the show today. Truly appreciate you spending the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm super excited to be here today.
Awesome. So first question I always like to start off with, what's your story? What's your hustle and grind? Why do you do what you do and have that passion for it?
How much time you got? I think that's a story within a story within a story, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it started for me because I took over a family business when I was 19 years old with no formal business schooling, no education, and I had to learn everything the hard way. And as any entrepreneur knows, at least at some point in your journey, it can be a very, very lonely road with a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and having to go in and learn and develop all those skill sets and implement the strategies and tactics and build out operational infrastructure, and having no real clue what I'm doing, the difference between being a true owner versus a owner operator. There was so many different levels of intellectual, spiritual growth and awareness that, looking back, I'm like, one of the greatest gifts I think that we have as entrepreneurs is the ability to save somebody else that time, that pain, that frustration, and help them catalyze new growth and create momentum within their business, and start to embody a level of confidence that they wouldn't otherwise have, because you don't know what you don't know. And with conviction, with level of certainty, you'll grow even faster. So I like to look at my role and the role of many business consultants as being that guide. It's that person that you're able to see the forest through the trees, anticipate the challenges and roadblocks that are ahead. And for me, it all started with taking over business in 19, having to fight, scrape, claw my way by, because it was a significant uphill battle. I'll tell more about that story later, I'm sure. Until I made that first major initial investment in myself and my self-education. And then I bore witness to how tremendous of a catalyst that investment was, albeit it was incredibly scary, because I'm going, what am I going to do? Is this going to produce the results? Am I just throwing this money away? But there was some part of me that knew, that inherently understood the value in paying for speed and learning from other people that have been there, that have done that have accomplished more, and that are higher level. It's like I was just thinking about it before we hopped on, the quote, "Your net worth is a direct reflection of your net work," gains more and more credence to me every single day. And learning the value of those relationships and nurturing them, I guess that's my long-winded way of saying that's where it started for me.
I love it. And that's something that I learned really early on as well. And I think in business that really helped me is your network is your net worth, because you can pull from a series of a group of people that are a hell of a lot smarter than you are, to help you through those points when we're in what I call the suck, that part where we're just clawing to keep things going and you're not quite 100% sure what's going to go on. And maybe I could take this, this money here and transfer this here and maybe pay this bill, the suck.
Yeah.
But it's really that. And that's been, I 100% understand that, man. That's an awesome, awesome thing to go by. But so I guess let's do this. Let's go into a little bit about what your superpower is. Like, what is that one thing? There's a lot of business coaches out there. We hear this term a lot. What specifically within business coaching are you good at? Like, what can you bring to folks?
My core competency and expertise, the primary vehicle that I use, or at least I start with, so to speak, when I'm moving into any business, is sales.
Mhm.
It's how can you increase. So most people are struggling with the conversions on the front end. How do we get more leads in front, excuse me, with the number of qualified leads that we're getting in front of? And then what's equally as important when we start getting those leads in is converting a greater number of those leads, assuming that they are proper marketing qualified leads, right? So I'm really good at coming in and analyzing the process. What is it that's missing from the sales team that's going to take them to a whole nother level? And where most sales trainers and consultants start is generally speaking with the strategy and tactics. What I believe is unique to me is I start on the opposite end of the spectrum. Strategy and tactics are vital, or paramount. They are very, very important. But the things that I look at first are, do we have clear and consistent messaging from marketing to sales on through fulfillment? There's got to be continuity, because if there's any lack or disconnect in one of those areas, it impacts the brand image and the brand identity, and people have different expectations for what they get within the programs. We got to consider those elements. Is there the leadership infrastructure in place? And that's everything from the team itself to did they have a clear North Star, i.e., mission, vision, values that are really guiding their decisions instead of, you know, shiny object syndrome and throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, so we can create those senses of consistency. Is there a congruent operational infrastructure? Do we have the proper hiring, training, and onboarding processes in place? Are there clear KPIs? Like, all of that stuff is paramount, and it builds the foundation for the right team. A lot of people think the team is the problem, but when you get the infrastructure in place, then the team falls into place and the culture evolves around it. Culture is a whole other issue and conversation, but again, that foundation is laid with all those critical pieces. So I look there, and then you have the right people, and then it's coming in and refining and honing their skill sets instead of having to necessarily teach everything from the ground up, if that makes sense. And I'm really good on that end of the spectrum too. But sales is the primary vehicle. I do touch on other elements of the business, from overall operations to marketing to financials, but they're not my core competencies. And that's where I will look for other power partners, strategic partners that are smarter than I am to come in and fix those things if I notice some big glaring holes. But second to sales, and taking a step back and looking at a little bit more high level, one of the things I'm really good at is looking at the big picture of business. And metaphorically, the way that I like to look at a business is like a puzzle. And most businesses have just a few missing pieces, right? And you plug those holes in the bucket, you put those puzzle pieces in place, and now you've got a beautiful, clear, congruent image, or a machine that's humming along and performing at a much higher and more proficient level of consistency than you would typically see. And the reality is, if you're in business, you got problems. It's like the whole idea is have a better quality of problem. So I come in, work with sales teams, help develop high performance sales teams, outstanding cultures, do leadership training development, the strategies, the tactics, the operations, all the fun stuff.
Well, I think that's one thing that really, it sounds like you're in that point where you come in really well with that position where it's like you're from a startup where your job title is yes, all the things, and everyone's is
Mm-hmm.
for like
Mm-hmm.
for people just getting up and going, through to saying, okay, now I don't want to keep working. Like you said earlier, I don't want to own a job. I want to own a
Mm-hmm.
business. I want to actually
Mm-hmm.
start running this thing like a business, and I want to start transitioning forward in that. And so, does that sound like the perfect kind of that world where you come into, where you kind of help the businesses transition to that, or is it bigger businesses, or?
Yeah, typically, I mean, my sweet spot is I typically work with organizations that are doing around $3 to $10 million in revenue. And what I'm really good at is coming in and helping them reach 10, 15, $20 million and beyond by, again, analyzing what those missing leaks are that are creating either operational inefficiencies that are inhibiting the overall performance of the team, an individual, the organization, so that instead of having to make, one of the biggest mistakes most people make, or most many business owners make, is they're not looking at the numbers. And our numbers are there to tell us a story. So if you're not looking at your numbers, you don't have clear optics. It's like hopping into a plane, deciding you're going to fly to Hawaii, and then you've got no GPS telling you what direction to go, and you pick a direction and hope you end up there. So it's like we got to lean into those numbers to find out what story the business is trying to tell us, come back to those North Star metrics, make sure that we're making decisions that are being guided by those, and then make sure the right team is in place to get us there. So all of that stuff works together very synergistically, and it's super, super important.
Cool. How did you come up with, how did you get into this niche? Like what was your like origin story, if you will, that got you into this one little world?
Hmm, that's another great question. I mean, I started when I was 16. Like
Yeah.
I guess I've always had an innate knack for sales and persuasion and just moreover communication.
Hmm.
And my very first job was 16 years old, sitting in a call center. I hate to admit it, as a telemarketer.
Uh-huh.
And what I realized, I was the youngest person in the company. I was one of 400 employees. I was the only one working part time, and I was always tied for first in terms of the top producing sales representative out of all 400 people at part time. And at the point where I had the opportunity to negotiate with the owner, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but then I took over the family business. There was elements that were business to business, elements that were business to consumer, product based, service based. So I had so much exposure to all of these different sales strategy and tactics. I didn't realize how much knowledge and experience I was getting at the time, but the way that you are presenting and handling with purchasing authorities versus your everyday consumer, or a government contract versus a corporation. I mean, everything required a different way of looking at it and a different way of communicating and presenting. And over time, I just realized it was something that I was gifted at. And then you couple that with opportunities to start speaking on stages, and it just it really organically evolved to the point where people started reaching out and saying, "Hey, do you think you could help me with this?" And all of a sudden, I thought, you know, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I should actually create a business behind it. Yeah.
I think there's always that moment when you start doing something basically for free or for almost free and you're going, wait, I could charge for this. This could be a business
Mm-hmm.
model.
Mm-hmm.
I think
No,
those
it
are
was a
also
lot
some
of
of the best
fun too.
ideas.
Oh,
Yeah.
it really is. Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause
exactly.
those are the things you get the passion for, and then so, oh, by the way, I
Mm-hmm.
make money at it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
I think the sweet spot that happens. So it sounds like it
Mm-hmm.
happened for you as well, and it sounds like wow, 16 top sales. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, what did I, what did I figure? I don't remember what the numbers were anymore, but it was top performer. It was a lot of fun.
That sounds cool. I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've brought up a couple of times the difference. You've said sales tactics, sales strategies. Do you differentiate between the two, and what is that differentiation? Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the tactic is the actual thing that you do. The strategy is all the steps that you take to get there. I would
Mhm.
be my best way at oversimplifying it.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends on in what context you want to look at it. If you want to look at it in the context of a sales conversation, you might look at the strategy as the outline of the overall syntax. You know, what questions you're asking and what order you're asking them, what your transition to your pitch looks like, what the actual pitch syntax looks like, how you're delivering your features and benefits, tying that back to the conversation or the questions that you and answers that you uncovered during the discovery portion of the sales process, and then the tactics is the actual doing of the thing. And that's, I guess, one of the best ways to, or at least in my mind, to differentiate the two.
Okay. Because I keep
Mm-hmm.
hearing people use these words, and it's like there is a differentiation. So I figured I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
kind of let you take a second to think about that in your own terms and just kind of let people get a
Mm-hmm.
better idea for what it is. So,
Mm-hmm.
do you can kind of anonymize it however you'd like, but do you have an like a specific um case study where you really helped these people a lot? Just tell the story behind that and how did it happen? Kind of what was going on, and love to hear the story behind it.
Mm-hmm. Specifics to sales or kind of business overall? Because I mean, there's like several different stories that are coming to mind.
Um, I would do just business overall. Let's start with that.
Let me try to think of a good one here. Give me a second.
Yeah, it's all good, man.
Um,
So many stories. Just you sound like
there
me.
really are,
Sometimes
because
it's
and
hard to
it's
pick
I
just
like
one,
I'm,
right?
my brain's going like size of the business. Am I talking like my solopreneur that maybe had an assistant or VA or two, or am I looking at like larger $10 million businesses? Like it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, in every context. I mean, I've got people that made the pivot. They did one thing for 10 years and it was helping them extract that knowledge and package it up into an information-based product. They could teach other people how to do those things. Um, there are circumstances where I've come in and, one of the big things that I've run into from the sales side of things too and this has become more of a pattern that I didn't really anticipate is owners being somewhat unfairly leveraged by a specific individual within the organization, where that individual was brought on to fulfill a major role. And then there becomes this almost resentment from that individual, even though it's what they were contracted to do and there was an agreement. And they give just enough to where they become the top performer and the owner is now dependent on that person.
Yeah.
But they're not fulfilling all of the roles to actually build out the team. And what this brings us back to is a conversation of leadership. And in my mind's eye, there are two primary roles that a leader has. A leader is somebody who innovates, they create change. And second, they create more leaders. And if that leader isn't helping to develop the skill sets, the aptitude, the performance, holding the team accountable of every single member on their team, then they're failing as a leader. Our job is to help each of our members of our team grow, to make them better, and then put people that are smarter than us in the positions that we need to fulfill in the other areas that we're not as competent in. So what it brings me back to is a specific organization that is and was kind of hostage, so to speak, to one of those individuals. And what I had to do was come in, extract that sales process, what made that person so effective, and then create and teach those processes to each of those performers on the team. Now, that was one element, but then I also had to get around the culture that had been created, because these individuals were 1099 contractors, and that's exactly how they were showing up.
Yeah.
I'm a contractor. They weren't treating it like their own business, that same depth of ownership and buy-in as you might or you hope to find in a great culture with appropriate employees. And so there was a cultural component that needed to be rebuilt. We had to reestablish new standards and foundations. It was coming back to core basics, to mission, vision, values, making sure that these aren't just things that are said, but they are being lived by every person in the organization. It's like, what are the guiding beliefs? How do we show up as a team? How do we communicate with each other? And how do we communicate with each one of our clients? So we started rebranding, redeveloping what those standards of that experience looks like, and then move into more of the strategy and tactics, teaching those frameworks. I stepped in and brought a higher level of accountability, started sitting with each one of those sales representatives and teaching and training and helping them to up level. And the coolest thing is, it's like there was a massive level of resistance in the beginning, but with the properly framed story, as we were talking about earlier, you can help eliminate and lower some of that resistance and increase buy-in and tear down some of those walls so you can take off a lot faster. So it was really finding a way to navigate a relatively complex and potentially ticking time bomb type situation, and bring in the leadership elements that were missing, the missing components of the infrastructure, get the right butts in the right seats, ensure that they had the tools that they needed to succeed at the high level, train all the individuals, create the accountability, the numbers, the North Star, and then the vehicle's moving. And we're just at that point constantly refining 1 millimeter shifts.
Understood. So you're talking about getting the right butts in the right seats, and that's something that's a huge thing. And I've seen it in organizations where it's like, no, you probably shouldn't be in this position, not because they were incompetent, but just not the right position. That can cause a lot of friction. How do you identify that? Is there like, there's a bunch of like profiles out there like DISC and things like that, but how specifically do you quantify that? And how do you make sure that the right person is the right position?
It's a great question. So there's two ways I would answer that. And part of it is I'm coming in and looking at the team that's in the present seats, right? And then there's also the other end and when we're doing the initial hiring. Now, the answer still is two and the same. Now, there's 4 critical lenses for me. Whenever I'm hiring or evaluating somebody for a particular role, I'm considering, are they a good fit for our ideal client? The average client avatar that we see within the organization, is there going to be a good personality match and fit? Are they a good fit for our internal culture? Do they live, breathe, and eat the values, how we show up as a team, so that we don't get any of that, high school locker room type friction, right? Do they have the skill set or aptitude that is needed to perform in that particular role or function? And then, one that's oftentimes overlooked is, do they believe in the product or service? Because if they don't really believe it, it doesn't matter how good they are. There's
Yeah.
going to be an element that's disingenuous, it's authentic, where there's resentment that gets built up. So those are the four filters I look through, and DISC and a lot of personality assessments and other things can be really great tools. But ultimately, what you have to look at is how people show up.
Mhm.
And going back to this last organization that I was thinking about as I was talking through, some of the things that we worked through, is what was missing is you had somebody that was a really great sales professional, but really was not a qualified leader.
Mhm.
And that's a really big challenge, and something that has to be overcome, and a great example of the right person but probably in the wrong seat.
Mhm.
We need somebody that has the ability and the willingness and desire to step in and lead from the back of the room, sit in
Mhm.
and observe the calls, coach those individuals on how they can make these improvements so they perform better in their individual roles. Whereas that person wanted to be out front.
Mhm.
It was a bit of the ego that was driving the ship. And that's, don't get me wrong, that's something that we all battle on some level or another, and either end of the spectrum.
Mhm.
A lot of it's driven by fears and insecurities and so on. But the reality is the only way we grow is if we grow and develop together.
Mhm. I think that's something I saw in large corporations. I've worked with a lot of large corporations, and part of what it was is that when the advancement comes from, so let's say from the engineering department, now this engineer is advanced to like a vice president level just because of merit, and they've worked their way up throughout the years. But come to find out, they're a really bad leader. They're a really awesome
Hmm.
engineer. They're amazing at
Hmm.
what they do, but they don't
Hmm.
have that fit. And I think that differentiation needs to be made, that sometimes it's building that leader in a person as well. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And then, it's desire and innate talent. It's like if you take a step back and forget the fact that we're talking about business professionals, and you look at it in any relationship, it's like if you take an intimate interpersonal relationship, husband and wife, and they're having challenges, the only way that that relationship is going to work is if they both have the desire to put in the time, the effort, and the work to make it better,
Mhm.
to schedule time together, to have the hard conversations, to have the fun conversations, to like literally you prioritize the things that you schedule, right? Or you schedule the things that you prioritize, the things that mean the most to you in life. And I think that is that big thing, is if they might want the title but not have the willingness, the discipline, the skill set, the aptitude to actually fulfill the role. And that's where I mean, where the ego can be so insidious. And I think a lot of that, well, I could go deep into where that, I'll get too philosophical here. So I'm going to leave that one at that end.
Understood. But I think anyone who's worked in the corporate world has seen this before, just maybe not have been able to put like a finger on exactly what it is. And
Hmm.
so it's one of those that once you identify, and especially as somebody up, especially like C-suite, somebody running a business, understanding that just because somebody is an amazing engineer doesn't mean they're going to be really good at leading an engineering team.
Hmm.
They're mutually exclusive. So yeah, I
Hmm.
guess it's something that we don't look at. But I heard it explained once a long time ago, and it just made a hell of a lot of sense. So I figured I'd bring it up here because it seems like it's
Yeah, no, I
you
mean, it's a
do.
great conversation. And it's not always the most fun situation or scenario to deal with. But the reality is, because I've been on the other end of it, where I was told that I wasn't a good cultural fit for an organization, and at first it just pissed me off. I mean, I did not understand it, but then as time goes on, it was the greatest blessing and experience that I ever had, because I wasn't. It was a
Mhm.
toxic culture. It was an environment that I did not want to be a part of, but I was so driven to help the company succeed. I believe so much in the product and the service. I was somewhat blinded by the limelight of the individuals that I was working with, like that there was these good and bad, I mean, so to speak, elements of the experience. But overall, what it taught me is you got to find people that you love to do business with, whether
Mhm.
you're the business owner, whether you are the client, whether you're the employee or contractor within the organization. It's like, make sure you got that good fit for the culture, the people, you have the aptitude, and that you really believe in that product or service. And when those things are in alignment, it makes a big difference. Every problem is an opportunity. Every challenge is a gift. And what felt like a real hit to me in the moment was such a powerful lesson that led me to greener pastures, to much better experiences, to higher levels of income, to higher levels of influence. I mean, it was like, keep that in mind too. It's a long-winded way of saying that if you are the person that's on the receiving end of this conversation, hopefully some part of your brain will come back to me saying this in the moment, that it's actually a gift,
Mhm.
and that you will feel 1,000 times lighter when you end up in the right seat.
Yeah.
and where you can really let your core competencies, your innate talents shine and shine through.
Yeah. I guess it comes back to something I heard years ago from a good friend of mine who said, I do cool stuff with my friends. That's what I do for business. And it's more I'm just so invested in this. I'm not only really invested, but also we're going to go build something. We're going to do something cool. And it's not just a job anymore. Like you were telling earlier about,
Mm-hmm.
some workers not being fully invested inside the company. It's a different perspective. It's one of the reasons I
Mm-hmm.
love working with entrepreneurs is because we do cool stuff with our friends and that's what we do.
Yeah, right. I
We build stuff together.
know. Yeah.
And it's not as much about a transactional job as it is more about just doing something better and making our mark, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. More impact and more income. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of
I
my
love
favorite
that.
things. It's like people, well, it's just so funny too, because people, and again, there's so much conditioning from our environment, our childhood, the
Yeah.
culture, what's on the news today. I mean, it's just, it's all those beliefs that we forget to challenge. But there's so often this, I'm amazed at how often I find a resistance to money,
Hmm.
and people are afraid of who they might become, how they might be perceived, what will happen to them, are they going to change if they come into money? And I'm like, no, money doesn't change who you are, it brings about more of who you are at your
Hmm.
core. And the way I've always looked at money is the more I earn, that's a direct reflection of the lives that I've impacted, the
Yeah.
businesses that I've transformed, and even moreover is the ripple effect.
Hmm.
It's like, if I improve this business and they go from 10 to $20 million in revenue, because it means in all likelihood that they just doubled the amount of lives that they are touching and impacting, the number of people that they are serving. And then that happens with those people. They start earning more revenue. They find a business or a passion they're competent in. Maybe they go on to teach. So, I mean, it's like we forget that the more you are earning, and of course, it's up to you what you do with it. But in my mind's eye, my belief system, it's a direct reflection of the lives that I've impacted, the businesses and people that I've transformed and changed, and ideally, hopefully, for the better.
Yeah. It's a mindset shift. It's versus being in
Mm-hmm.
lack. Because if you're thinking, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, I got to make money at this. I mean, to charge more for this. That's a lack mentality. Doing cool stuff with your
Mm-hmm.
friends, building something, building a legacy forward is
Mm-hmm.
is more abundant. And oh, by the way, I make money on it. You make a hell of a
Yeah.
lot of money. And I've seen this
Yeah.
happen over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
We're
it's
just
weird
really
too, 'cause it
programmed.
feels better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it
When
does.
you're
It
not
does.
coming from scarcity and you're coming from, to your point, abundance, like the energy is just, you're lighter.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we were saying in the green room beforehand, where it's like, I turned in my 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
I did it for a
It,
reason, and it doesn't seem like it's that much. If I had to work a regular job and work those hours, I'd be miserable. But for me, it's like, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, that's why we do it, you know?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's that illusion of control that is so
Yes.
appealing.
Yes. Yep. So
Or delusion. Either way.
delusion, as I think, yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we're wrapping up here, getting towards the end, but I do want to ask one question. I ask this of every person that I have on here. What is one book or podcast that has had a significant impact, either overall or just recently or some other thing? What could you recommend? It's hard to choose, isn't it?
That is like the hardest question. I read like a book a week. And I mean, because to me, it's all about stage of life and journey. I mean,
Yeah.
every book had its purpose at a certain point in time. I don't think we spend enough time going back to the books that we've read in the past because,
Mm.
every time you read it, it's like, you think back to when you're kids and you're watching a movie. And
Uh-huh.
like you can watch that same movie 1,000 times. Your parents are going, "Oh my gosh, aren't you bored?" But the kid is finding something new in every single moment. You
Yeah.
know, and I think if we can bring that same level of curiosity and playfulness and awareness to our education,
Yeah.
it goes 1,000 times over. So if I had to pick a book, um, dude, this is a tough one, Andrew. I really don't know if I can answer that question specifically. I've got a million. I mean, it's like, Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within, I think is the
Uh-huh.
must read for anybody. Simon Sinek's Start With Why, Stephen
Yes.
Kotler's The Art of Impossible, Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point, um, the dichotomy of leadership. I mean, with oh shoot, I can't remember his name now.
That's okay. I'll put it in the comments so
Yeah,
we get it. But yeah, no,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
I
like
got it
all
for
those are great, but I think a big
yeah.
thing is starting here too. A lot of time, like I'll go back to it. We go back to the strategies and tactics. But the number one chokehold in any business is the psychology of its leader.
Mhm.
So if you are struggling, if you keep hitting the same plateau, if you're noticing these patterns that are showing up in your relationship, in your business, and your friendships, in any area of your life, it's because there's something going on in here, or more appropriately, in here. And when we heal those wounds, that's what allows us to break through those walls, those glass ceilings, and really create a whole new level of success. And then, there's the irony, or another dichotomy. Each new level brings a new devil. We have something new to break through or learn or whatever. But I think if I had to encourage one thing, it's really starting here, and finding the right coach to work with to break through traumas that you're unaware of, that are having a huge impact, a monumental impact on all of your beliefs, your decisions, and it's stuff that you picked up as a child.
Yeah.
So start with the mind.
Well, that's one thing that I've noticed as an entrepreneur is if you go in with any sort of issues, they are going to be amplified by the situation you're in as far as an entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
especially when you're in the suck and you're in that
Hmm.
early parts where you're just trying to get this thing to go together, every single thing that you maybe in another situation might have been able to just sort of let slide or not really confront, now you're really forced to confront it.
Hmm. Oh,
And
very
it,
much
it
so.
yeah, it builds a level of strength that I think is really in general brings up the entire level of the world, like the people around you,
Hmm.
because you're being forced to really, how do I put it? You're really being forced to confront things in yourself. You now have become a stronger person. You can go out and become a better leader, become a better this, become a better human, become a better part of the communities that you're involved in, because enrich your relationships, stuff like that.
Wholeheartedly agree. Absolutely.
So thank you so much, brother, for being on. I really, really appreciate it today, man. Thanks for spreading all that wisdom.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It was a lot of fun, Andrew. Thank you.
Uh, Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Zac, check out the link in the description.